episode of my podcast. My name is Cheryl, and this is Cappuccino Crafts, my little channel on YouTube and my corner of the general interwebs, where I like to talk about knitting and books and TV and movies and life and other chatty things that I want to share with you. Thank you so much for choosing to watch this video and spend a little bit of your time with me. I really hope that you enjoy it. Please settle in, get yourself a delicious beverage, and let's have a lovely visit. So today is another Monday, January 24th, and it was a pretty good week. Yeah, and I finished 3 books. One of them I started this week, and 2 of them I've been reading for a good while. So I really haven't done any crafting, no knitting, no crochet, so really nothing to show there. But I finished a big reading project that I really loved, which was reading my first actual reading of a novel from one of the Bronte sisters. I've seen movie adaptations of several things, and I might possibly have read one of them for school or on my own as a teenager, but I am not 100% sure. I think I might just be thinking of the movies that I have watched. So this is the one for sure first novel that I remember and can record for my history that I have read myself. It is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and a companion novel that was written by another author. It was published in 1966 as a response to this classic Gothic novel, and that is The Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys, or Rhys, not sure the correct pronunciation. But yeah, I read these together. I tabbed them a lot. There was so much good stuff. And reading them together, I think I really enjoyed both of them more. I do believe that Wide Sargasso Sea can stand on its own independently. I do think it's good enough and strong enough to stand on its own, but there's no doubt that it is a richer experience if you do have the background of the novel Jane Eyre. And reading these together, they just complemented each other and enriched the whole experience. I loved it. I did not love, and I've been saying this every week since I started reading them, I did not love Rochester at all. I do not see him as a romantic hero. I do not, I definitely do not pine after him. I don't see him. I don't love the love story of Jane and Rochester. I never rooted for them. I think when I saw the movies, I probably did. But reading them and coming back to the story now, I definitely do not. And I do not see Jane Eyre as a romance. It's definitely a gothic novel. It's one of the like standout classic standard setters for Victorian Gothic literature. So it's definitely Gothic. It definitely has a love story because, you know, yes, reader, she did marry him. But I do not believe that this should be categorized as a romance. I think this really is Jane's story first and foremost. I think it is her coming of age. It tells her story from a young child through her schooling, through her going out and getting her first independent job and being on her own and becoming an independent woman with her own agency. Jane is a character with a very determined will, even as a child, but she was very much constrained and was not able to very often act on her own will and use her agency. By the end of this novel, she comes fully into her own agency and is asserting her will, making her own decisions, regardless of what other people might want her to do. It is her coming of age. So I would categorize Jane Eyre as a coming of age or Bildungsroman. I don't think I pronounced that well at all, but and why Sargasso Sea? I would not categorize as a romance either. I would class it as maybe a tragedy. And it does tell the life story with some gaps. It doesn't cover every year, every month of her life, and it doesn't start, you know, on the day she was born, but it covers most of the life and the important events in the course of her life, and the turning points in her life of the character at the center of the secret of Thornfield, and that twist. And in the Bronte novel, she is really not on page very much, and she really is just a plot device. Yeah, she's a plot device in the novel Jane Eyre, but here she gets her full story. And that is Bertha or Antoinette, because we learn her true name, her true given name in this novel, and we get her story, her full story, and she tells it from her perspective. We do also get Rochester's perspective as well, so they both give their sides of the story. But this really is about colonialism, and it is a feminist feminist response, although, you know, a lot of people see Jane Eyre as proto-feminist, which I think I would agree with. Especially the development of Jane Eyre and her asserting her agency and not being willing to just go along with what others think is good for her or what others want from her. She will not just give in to that. So I think this definitely takes the feminism further, and it's later. It was published in 1966, but yeah. Anything else that I want to say? I've kind of given my response a lot over the weeks of reading, so I don't think I have anything particularly new to say. Oh no, one thing I appreciated about the ending of the novel Jane Eyre. I appreciated that by the time Jane and Rochester do marry, they are on more equal footing than they were. The power dynamic has shifted. I do believe that some of Rochester's arrogance has been, you know, pulled out from under him, and he is not, it's been knocked out of him. His pride and his arrogance, he's not standing on the same footing that he was. And Jane comes to him as an independent woman. She does not need to depend on him to take care of her or to provide money for her. So she comes to him freely and independently with her own means, and not asking to be provided or cared for. And they are on. So that made their marriage easier for me to, it made me not so frustrated at their marriage. Do I think Jane, in my opinion, do I think Jane could have made a better decision? Yes, I do. But Jane knows her own mind, and she made the decision. Nobody, I don't think anybody could have talked her out of it. So that was her choice, her full agency, and so at least they were on a little bit more of a equal start when they finally got married. Yeah, so I did start and finish a book. And that book was an audiobook that came in. I had a hold request. It came in to my Libby app, and I listened to The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey, which I really loved. I had heard a lot about it from other people on YouTube, and it is a science fiction domestic thriller, I think is a pretty good way to describe it. Although I think thriller may not be the perfect word, because it is not fast-paced. It is very character-focused, and it is not like what you would expect from like an action-y, really super page-turner thriller with a really super convoluted plot and a lot of focus on that side of the plot. No, this is really about the characters and the themes, and it uses a sci-fi element to enhance that. But the setup is that Evelyn is a research scientist who has developed a cloning process, and she is perfecting it for practical use. She has funding from people, corporations, agencies, whatever, who would like to use this process for, to provide security doubles for celebrities, politicians, famous and influential people, and other things. I imagine that these clones, these duplicate clones, could be used for, intelligence operations and other things like that. But her husband, Nathan, stole her notes and has used her notes to set up his own lab and create a clone of Evelyn. And he is having an affair and has set up in a house with Martine, the clone of Evelyn that he has designed and shaped through the process to be his perfect woman, and the woman that Evelyn could never be. Where Evelyn is super ambitious in her career and not domestic at all, and not very nice, and she's not nice, and she does not really she's not necessarily supportive, but he makes Martine and shapes his clone to be pliant and domestic and kind and supportive and everything that he wants in a woman. And that is the setup, and that is what Evelyn discovers. And she meets Martine and sees her clone, and we go from there. And from this setup, you see the, tradition, the cheating spouse trope with a sci-fi twist, and you think you know what to expect. You think you know where it could go, and you don't. You don't. The layers of the characters are peeled back, and we learn. And we also see up close the cloning process and kind of the philosophy or rationalizations that she uses to get around the ethics of things that they do to the clones. This also is very much delves into domestic abuse and cycles of abuse and trauma, and it is chilling. This psychological study is really, really chilling. And that is where the thriller element comes in. And I found the ending I would not have predicted, and I found it really, it ended with a disturbing edge. I was unsettled through most of the book. This was a very unsettling read, and the ending did not resolve. The ending did not resolve that into a feeling of comfort. No, the ending was also unsettled and disturbing to me, and it was really, really good. It was so good. I have not read a book by Sarah Gailey before, and I will definitely read more from her. I liked her writing style. I found it really readable, but also elements of her prose style I really enjoyed for its own style, and it was a great read and very unsettling. So that is what I have finished. And last night I did start a new audiobook. Another hold request came in from my library, and I started listening to Honeycomb by Joanne M. Harris. And the print book of it does have illustrations, so I would like to see a print copy sometime and see the illustrations. But I'm just listening to the audio. And if I love this book, I will probably get a copy, a print copy, so that I can have it and have the illustrations. But we'll see what I feel like at the end. Right now, I'm at the very early beginning. It is a collection of fairy tales that are interconnected. Characters come back, and threads of stories are continued in later stories. So they are interconnected. But they have a feeling of like old-fashioned literary fairy tales, like Hans Christian Andersen stories, like Grimm's fairy tales. Now, Grimm's fairy tales were collected from the folk oral tradition and written down. Hans Christian Andersen were written as more as the literary style, and they were not from old tradition. I'm sure that he was influenced by traditional fairy tales, but they were original literary fairy tales. But it has that feeling. These feel like old style, like Hans Christian Andersen. You can see influence from the old tradition of the Grimm's fairy tales and other old folk oral historical fairy tales. And there's fae, there's magic, there's all the things that you would expect. And so far, I think I've listened to 8 stories, or maybe 6 or 8 stories I've listened to, and I'm enjoying them. Yeah. So that's the reading. And I haven't really been watching anything. I don't really have anything else to talk about. So I hope that you are enjoying whatever creative projects you might be working on, crafting or other kinds of creativity. I hope that you are enjoying your reading and having a good, we're coming to the end of our first month of this reading year. So I hope that it's been a good first month of reading for you. And I hope that you and your family and all of your loved ones are well, and take care, and talk to you next time. Bye-bye.